All right, I've gone ahead and hit record, so I'm just going to say welcome to all of our parents and community members and administrators, and I see a few teachers on here as well, for joining us today. We are excited to present to you and be able to answer your questions in a very informal way regarding our Restart Greenwood Lake program. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Jeffrey Golubchik.
All right, welcome everyone. And just if you, in the chat box, if you have questions that I'm not answering along the way, please feel free to ask a question in the chat box and we'll get to it. There will definitely be plenty of time for questions at the end though. This is a very short presentation and then there'll be time to talk at the end and answer any questions that you have. So we can go to the next slide. So I want to share with you both options. So there's the in-person right now, and then if you chose distanced choice. So I'll first go over in-person. We're keeping the cohorts small. So just to go over that term again in terms of what cohort means, it's a group of students that stay together the entire day. So whereas in the past, if you've had a child in the school who has been a fourth grader or above, they've moved throughout the building. In some cases, one homeroom has had PE or art with another homeroom where they've been mixed. Cohorts, homerooms are staying together this entire year and as much as possible are staying in the same room. And those will be small, about 10 to 12 students in grades 4 through 6. When in the classrooms and in the hallways, and we're going to keep physical distancing. So I'll show you an image on the next slide how we're going to do that. But the students will be 6 feet apart in the classroom or more. And when hopefully for PE, we can try to bring them outside as much as possible. Even I know Mr. Ferry, who's our art teacher, for those of you who are new to the school, is going to try to bring them outside for art as well. And that in that case, we will, if they're unmasked, we will keep them about 12 feet apart if they're engaged in physical activity. Masks will be on in common areas such as hallways and when 6 feet of physical space is not possible. But when they are in their classrooms, sitting at their desks, they will be permitted to have their mask off. Teachers will be moving throughout the building, not the students. Unless the child obviously is going to the bathroom. For the teachers moving, the way that that'll look is that if they have ELA, the ELA teacher will come into their homeroom. If they have math, the math teacher will come into their homeroom. And then the specials teachers will also come into their homeroom as well. Again, taking them outside as much as possible, if that allows. We're going to have, in order to support students' social emotional learning, this is really the hallmark of bringing kids back to school for the first time in 6 months, if you can really imagine that. We're going to provide them with as much social emotional learning possibilities as possible. It'll start with the beginning of the day where we're going to have an advisory period where hopefully once we start getting the bus routine and the drop off at the beginning of the day set, we'll have about 15 minutes at the beginning of the day where homeroom teachers will have time with their classrooms. But also in grades 4 through 6, guidance there'll be a guidance lesson twice a month, which will be taught by Miss C, who's our guidance counselor. So that'll be an explicit social emotional learning classroom lesson taught to the whole class. Lunch will be in classrooms. And so during that 45-minute period, they'll have time, just like they had this past year in the middle school, they had about a 45-minute, 15-minute lunch wave, where about half of that they were eating and about half of that they went outside. So we will have zones set up outside where students in cohorts will be able to go to one zone and stay together as a cohort and then rotate based on a schedule so that this way they get to use all of the equipment outside on a rotating basis. So that is our in-person schedule, and I'll go over the distance choice and then show you some pictures, and then there'll be a lot of time for questions. So with the distance choice model, this is if you're choosing at this time to keep your children home. We will be taking attendance, just like if the children were in school, so that's important for you to know. Cohorts may be larger than the 10 to 15 in grades 4 through 6, and that's because we need to keep all of the students together who are learning at a distance so that we can meet their needs and provide them with all of the academic classes and the specials. The schedules of live synchronous instruction will be similar to the in-person cohorts. So we will treat the distance choice section as if it is, say, a 4th section or a 5th section of that grade level. So they will receive specials, they will receive all of their academic subjects. There is a possibility for breakout rooms where if we're using Zoom or, well, we'll be using Meet, where the teacher might be able to break out with the students on a smaller basis. Assignments will be posted to Google Classroom. And then just going along with attendance, this is, I think, probably one of the most important structural pieces of the at-home. We really expect the children, because they will be part of the classroom with a teacher in front of them, that they are dressed for class, for school, that they're seated, that their video is on, that they are ready to learn and access the learning. Because again, you know, let's say 4th grade, if it's Mrs. DiBernardi is sitting in front of them for a reading lesson, we really want them to be accessing that as best as possible, as best as they can. Oh, next. So this is what our classrooms, 2 of our classrooms look like now, where we have about 13 to 14 desks in each room based on the size of the classroom. And you could see in the red box in the picture on the left, that is actually a 7-foot ruler that has a 6 feet marked off, where there's about half of 6 inches on both sides, so that there's a little room for slack. But that shows you how we have physically measured to make sure that our desks are going to be socially distant, so that students, if they are unmasked sitting at their desks, they are not within 6 feet of one another. And then we have purchased green footprints that we are going to put in the center of all of the hallways, where students will know that they are moving in a unidirectional way. And some of this will it'll be set up on the first day of school, but obviously, just like with any first day of school structures, it'll take some time. You know, kids will need to get used to it in terms of which staircase do they use, but the footprints will be down and they'll be clearly marked which direction in which they should be traveling. And then for those of you who know our building, for the area in between the cafe and moving to the 4th and 5th grade wing, that will be a bi-directional hallway. So we'll have footprints going in both directions. So in terms of the schedule, here's a sample of what a schedule will look like. And if you can look at, I'm sorry, this is if school is closed for all students, it's what school will look like. You will have the students will have literacy time, they will have math time, science and social studies time. If they are 6th graders receive health twice a week, so they will have time for that as well. They will also have a special. So should school be closed, remotely learning, and this is all students are learning remotely for whatever reason, whether the state says schools need to close or there's another reason, this is a sample of what a schedule could look like. And then this is broken down just a little bit further so that you could see how this could look in terms of the literacy blocks and the math block, some small group support for students, what the specials rotation may look like. We may do it all on one day, so that this way, Monday through Wednesday, students are learning, have their academic subjects. We'll have to figure out iterations of it based on the grade level, based on the number of sections, but this is an example of what it could look like. All right, so as I promised, a short presentation, but we are now here for any questions that you have. So you can ask it in the chat box, or you can unmute your microphone and ask questions that way.
Yep, so I just want to, if I can, just point out that we're going to do general questions. If you have questions specific to your child, if you can reach out to Mr. Golubchik directly. And then also, because we have so many, instead of just chiming in, if you can just make a note in the chat box, just say, I have a question, and then Mr. Golubchik will call on you, and then you'll be able to unmute your mic and say something. If you are unable to mute for some reason, like if you're at work listening to this, you can certainly type your question and we will read it aloud. So.
And while Tice, it looks like she's typing at the moment, I'll just also mention, for those of you who have students entering the school and you are for fourth graders, I know when students were third graders last year, Miss Rasmussen and Miss Chapman, who are seventh grade teachers, they joined your child's homeroom with the students who are in our National Junior Honor Society, and gave them they gave each student a letter, and they walked through what a school day would look like, because obviously we could not do that in person. And they did a virtual tour, if you will. We will have an opportunity for students in their small cohort to have a tour of the building when we come back in the fall, when we have those 4 days at the beginning of the year that are superintendent's conference days. So we will figure out a schedule so that it is socially distant, but also offers that opportunity. And if you are a first-time parent to the school, we can also offer that opportunity for you to walk through the building if you haven't been in the middle school before. So Tice asked, is there going to be some sort of orientation for incoming fourth graders? I see you've been on committees with me, we're in sync, so I think I read your mind. So yes, so we will have an opportunity for fourth graders to come in the building in their homeroom cohort, so that it's a group of 10 to no more than 13 or so students, and they'll have that opportunity to meet their homeroom teacher, meet the teachers, and get a feel for school before the day starts. Orientation for incoming sixth grade students, we might not do a formal orientation for that, but what we are talking about doing is that every homeroom teacher in grades 4 through 8 will have a meeting time, about a 45-minute meeting time with their homeroom prior to students' first day of school. So if you were on the board meeting last night, students' first 2 days of school will be half students in one day, half students in the next. I believe that's the 8th and the 9th. But that previous week, homeroom teachers will have a meeting with their homeroom. And so we will set up that schedule in the very near future.
I just want to point out, if we can go to Mrs. Ludmer, she was before those other two that she has.
Oh, sure, yes.
So I think, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay, hi, thank you. So I was wondering about how long will the children be in the classrooms, for, how many hours will they be in the same classroom without moving? I have big concerns about not mask wearing. I'm just gonna put that out there.
Sure, it will be without having full schedules, which obviously depends on the specials, rotation. It will be a few hours at a time.
That said, we are encouraging teachers to take their students outside for outdoor classrooms. We don't have an outdoor classroom specific space, but they certainly could go outside and sit outside in the grass and hold class. We're encouraging that as much as possible.
Yeah, that sounds great. Being outside, I mean, I think that's a great area to have a mask-free zone, in larger spaces. So there's no accommodations for even partitions or anything around their desks. I was just curious. I didn't see any of that in the plan.
So no, we did not purchase partitions for every desk. We are keeping all of the desks 6 feet apart. Now, that said, if they're meeting in a small group, Mrs. Petrozzi, if you want to get up for 1 second and just, you know what I'm asking you to get. If for example, a speech teacher is working in a small group in a small space with a student or such, Mrs. Petrozzi has purchased these separators that could go on a table between a teacher and the student so they could be in close proximity to each other, but have a barrier in between. So we do have that for certain situations, just not in all classrooms. And thank you, Amy, for Vanna Whiting that for us.
All right, so I'm going to go through. Zora, did you have other questions? All right, I will go through the chat box and then we'll have an opportunity if there are other questions so I could answer them. So I answered the orientation. So Alyssa Saladino asked, has it been determined if there will be classes that will be mask required and not mask required? So we are going to try to put those who are requested to be masked in the same cohort of students. So if there are about, let's say 6 students where they're requesting to be masked, we're going to try to put them together. There may still be students in that cohort where parents are not requesting their children to be masked. And then what time will parents be able to enter the middle school in the morning if they are dropped off? So our typical school day starts around 7:45, 7:50. So we will set up a schedule where based on the final numbers of kids taking buses and kids being dropped off, probably opening our doors a little bit earlier and having teachers here a little bit earlier in their classrooms to be able to greet students so that we have the staff available for that. So once we have those final numbers, we'll be setting up those schedules based on the bus runs and parents who are dropping off. The next question is, do you have enough students going into 6th grade to cohort with masks? So to previous question, we'll have to just look at the final numbers. Again, putting all students together where the request is that they are masked. After school clubs. So as we have to reevaluate this, in terms of there being after school clubs, once we get the year started, in terms of even the possibility of a virtual club, we're gonna have to look into that. And I know that Ms. Haddon is open to that once we get the year started and really seeing how the year goes once we get it off the ground. Explain the air filtration system. So I can start off, or unless you want to do this, Ms. Haddon. Can't, I think you're muted. All right, so.
No, so I'm here. I was pulling up, I saw that question in advance, so I was pulling up my slide from last night so I can share it. So I am working on that right this second. So we are upgrading every single one of our classroom filtration systems to a MERV 13 rating. And you can see on this chart here, I'm hoping, can someone give me a thumbs up? Can you see the chart? Okay, that we are upgrading to a MERV 13 rating so that each of the classrooms will filter bacteria and virus carriers out so that it cannot go into the whole ventilation system throughout the building. So they will now be caught by the filter. As a part of that, our cycling will occur 6 times per hour. And what that means is that every 10 minutes, the air in the room will be completely recycled. It'll be a whole new fresh set of air. So again, 6 times per hour, whole new set of air in the classroom, not recycled air.
So a question about what are the policies for restrooms and then cleaning the playground and how will the rooms be sanitized. So in terms of the restrooms, students will be using it one at a time. We'll have monitors outside the restrooms so that we are able to maintain that. Restrooms will also be cleaned throughout the day. In terms of cleaning the playground equipment, be cleaned between the cohorts. So we will also have to monitor if we have let's say 4 sections of 4th grade and we have 6 recess areas, we'll have to rotate so that an area that's used doesn't get used then for the next period. So whether it's cleaned at the end of that day or it's cleaned before the next cohort uses it.
And I'm going to quickly share my slide from last night on this, just to go through the rest. This is specific to cleaning and disinfecting. So again, I spoke to the MERV 13 upgrade, 6 cycles of fresh air per hour, all new air. We are going to be cleaning the classrooms with a product called H2 Orange, and that is a cleaner. And we'll be using a product called HWS 64 as our disinfectant spray. It is COVID-19 EPA approved. But that disinfectant spray will go into classrooms 1 time per day at the end of the day so that it is completely dried and ready for the next school day. There will be extra cleaning during the day for frequently touched surfaces such as bathrooms, handrails, doorknobs to public spaces, etc. The classrooms will have wipes for students to be able to clean the desks before and after eating, and those are regular wipes that you and I would use at home. They are not heavy chemicals or anything. It's just enough to clean the surface. We are putting touchless hand sanitizer stations in every single classroom and at every school entrance. And then we've also installed touchless sinks and toilets. So I hope that answers the rest of the cleaning question.
So if a student comes up positive, does the entire class have to quarantine at home for 14 days? If this happens, will the class then go online for that period of time? So if a class is quarantined, if a class is asked to learn from home, then online learning will be provided for that class. So we will have 1 section on each grade that is the online classroom, and so that will then accommodate kids who are learning from home. When do we need to decide in-person and choice? So there was 1 survey that went out, and then Ms. Haddon is going to send another survey at some point between now and the weekend, where you will have another opportunity to either, I keep saying it's like Regis Philbin on Millionaire, like, is that your final answer? Like, lock in your vote. So you probably will not have to fill it out again if you've already filled it out, but if you're changing your choice, so you chose your choice remote and now you want your child to be in school, that will be information we will need so we could plan for that.
Yep, and I will send that out tomorrow and it will be due Sunday.
So a question, what consequences will there be for students who don't comply with the facial covering requirement? So it is New York State policy that all who are in public spaces, which for us in a school area includes the hallways, it includes the buses, it includes any area where people cannot be socially distant when you're within 6 feet of each other, that you are wearing a face covering. So without jumping to consequences, it would be a conversation. If a child says, I don't want to wear it when in the hallway, I would probably have a conversation with the child, a conversation with the parent, and hopefully we can come to what is an agreement that it is safe for students, it is safe for all people in our building if when we're within 6 feet or in those public spaces, we are wearing face coverings.
And just to follow up with that, 2 things I wanted to point out. 1, there are students and adults that cannot medically handle a mask. And if that's an instance for an individual child, then we just ask for a doctor's note and we will likely recommend a face shield for those students so that they have something. But there will be students not masked due to medical reasoning in the building. In terms of refusing to comply, that does follow under the code of conduct for not following a school rule. And again, we always start, as Mr. Glebchuk said, with conversations and working with the students and working with the families. But ultimately, if there is failure to comply, that is something that we would go and move towards the code of conduct for. Unless they are a student who cannot medically handle.
So the next question is, how are teachers going to address being seated for hours at a time? Children need movement. Alyssa, I agree with you completely. I think that that is going to be addressed through bringing them outside as much as possible. I mean, even with I have twins who are going back to school, and that right now the plan is for them to be in small cohorts like we are having, and then to actually have cohorts of kids outside as much as possible. So as the weather allows, as space allows, you know, teachers will be doing that. Bus-wise, how will it work if I decide to not send my child on bus, but later on I need the bus? How will that work? So you will let us know. You know, we're asking that you let us know per quarter so that we can plan. But if something shifts in your own schedule at any given time, absolutely let us know. And
what I recommend in that instance is you go ahead and sign up for the bus, and that way we schedule you, we get you the bus stop, we have it arranged to bring your child home, and then if you are doing the pickup, that's fine. So that would be my recommendation in that case. I just want to follow up one more thing. I'm receiving feedback that my explanation of the MERV 13 and the 6 cycles was not clear. So I'm just going to try to say it in a different way, that each classroom has its own air filtration system. It is not a universal air system like you would have at your home where everything goes through the same tubes. Each classroom has their own air filtration system. It will have its own MERV 13 filter, and it sucks in air literally from outside the classroom space, brings it into the classroom. And again, every 10 minutes, the air in the classroom is completely recycled in a new set of air. But it's just for that classroom. It's an isolated space. It's not going all throughout the building. We don't have tubes like we do in our houses going throughout the building. Each classroom is its own separate system.
Since students are going to eat lunch in their desk, what is the amount of time allocated for play recess? So, and it's about a 45-minute period. So it's about half and half. I think, you know, once we get the year started, it'll shift hopefully to kids. As with any school year, kids will eat quicker and then have a little bit more time outside once we get routines and structures in place. But they have a 45-minute period, as they did before, to eat and play. How are we supporting the teachers that would prefer teaching in classes with masks on? I believe you mentioned about 70% would prefer this. Ms. Haddon, do you want to?
Yep, so I'll answer this. So I don't want to stick to the 70% because when I spoke about that last night, it really was just throwing a number out just off the top of my head. I've spoken with a lot of the teachers, but we have not done an official poll with the teachers like I did with the parents. But that said, I have had a few teachers come to me very concerned about masks. And what I have talked to them about is that the teacher, of course, can wear a mask as he or she wishes. And then if they have concerns, what we will do is where we're putting the cohorts of students, we will have them have that homeroom with the students that would choose masks. So if we have 10 students that in 4th grade that said that their parents indicated they wanted their child to wear a mask all day, the 4th grade teacher that has concerns about that would have that homeroom of students.
During recess, can kids play without social distancing? So social distancing rules do apply. So they need to be if they're within 6 feet, they have to have their masks on. If they're not within 6 feet, then they do not. And if there is physical exertion, like during physical education or singing during music, then they need to have 12 feet of space, which is possible if they're outside. And they're in a small group of 10 where they could then, you know, we have those of you who know our spaces, then we have a large amount of space where the kids we could spread them out into those cohorts.
I'll take the next 2 questions, Mr. Glubchik. One is about the school calendar that was previously posted. So last night I spoke with the Board of Education. September 1st through the 4th are now going to be all the superintendent's conference days for the year. The calendar will be approved at the next August meeting, but I will begin communicating that out to parents soon. So September 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th are now superintendent's conference days, which means that staff will be in, but students will not be in. On Tuesday, September 8th, we will have 50% of our students in. On Wednesday, September 9th, we will have the other 50% of our students in. And on Thursday, September 10th, we will have 100% of students in. So that is the only change to our calendar. The next question was about the MERV 13 system also being in common areas like hallways. Hallways do not have filtering systems. Oh, it says my connection is unstable. Can you hear me? Am I clear? Yeah, okay. The hallways don't have their own separate system. They kind of work off of the classrooms. But in terms of the large common areas, such as the cafeteria and the gymnasium, yes, those are getting upgraded to MERV 13.
In the next question, in terms of parents knowing the type of cohort, maybe if you could clarify that, Ms. Mena, at the bottom, or if it's an individual question, definitely shoot me an email. I don't want to answer that question incorrectly, but if you just clarify that. But we will be letting parents know child's homeroom and their schedule. You will receive that by those superintendent's conference days, so around the 1st. We're going to be working on that the week of the 24th, getting those out to you with our normal summer packets, which if you've had a child in the school before will include a letter from me, health packets, any type of, some of our forms will move to online. So it's really just an informational packet, but that'll also have your child's schedule in it. So the next question, as answered last night, you said there will be no MERV 13 filters in hallways. I understand masks are required in hallways, but not everyone wears them properly. That is a concern. So there will be, sorry, did you?
That's what I just want to say. It's not that we're not putting MERV 13 filters in the hallways. It's that the hallways don't have filtration systems. It's not possible. There is no system in the hallways, but anywhere where there is a system in classrooms, the large community spaces, those are getting upgraded to MERV 13. Go ahead, Jeffrey, next one. Sorry.
Yep, so will coverings be worn all day, or are the children allowed to move them? The children are allowed to move them when sitting at their desks. Absence will work as the same before. If a student is absent from school, we'll have our call-in line. If a student has a temperature above the regulated temperature, then that is a conversation that you will have with our school nurse. That is probably the one change, but if it's a typical absence, then that'll be treated as it was before when your child was in the elementary school, or if you have another middle school, or if it's a typical absence. If a child has positive, will the teachers in that grade quarantine? So
I'll take that. So the Department of Health has asked school districts to make sure that if we have a positive case, that we call them and work with them, and they would closely work with us and advise us on what steps we need to take in terms of who needs to quarantine, what spaces need to quarantine, does just one classroom, what teachers, the whole school, et cetera. And it would be based on the individual situation. So if we have a case, we will work with the Department of Health, and will follow all of their advice related to closure or quarantining. We are doing contact tracing, so we will have anyone that is scheduled to be in space, we will know. But if you just enter a space of your own accord, we will have sign-up sheets outside of the doors, and we will have people will sign in and out of what time they entered the space and what time they left the space. In addition, we do have cameras. So cameras can be very helpful as well in terms of who did someone interact with. So for example, if a student feels ill and suddenly gets clammy in the middle of the day, the teacher sends them down to the nurse's office, and the child walks through the hallway from the classroom all the way to the nurse's office, we would be able to follow that child, and they ultimately test positive for COVID. We would be able to follow that child's course through the school to see if they passed anybody and share that information with the Department of Health.
The next question is children that if children need to meet with the counselor or need extra support, will they receive it? So I'm imagining by extra support, the question relates to a type of counseling service regarding social emotional learning, and the answer is yes. So in addition to the two social emotional learning lessons a month that classrooms will receive, your child, if they need additional support, we have a full-time school psychologist and a full-time guidance counselor. Just like in the elementary school, if you're moving up here, then they will receive the support that they need. So teachers will definitely reach out to Miss C, who's our guidance counselor, or Miss Greenberg, who's our school psychologist.
If I could jump in there, if there are any parents who have students that have mandated related services, counseling is one of those related services. We are very sensitive to the fact that that is a private matter. And if they are mandated services, and I'm sure even if they're not mandated, Mrs. Greenberg and or Ms. C will meet the child at their cohort and escort them to their office in a private location that has either one of the partitions that I had showed earlier, if it's a one-on-one session, and all the rooms after they're being used for related services, counseling, speech, OT, will be wiped down and sanitized before the next group or individual student has a session.
And I just want to jump in. I'm not sure if it's Tiffany or Joe that's on, but my PowerPoint from last night, I will post to our Restart Greenwood Lake page where I have all the other resources so that you can go there and access that. And that link, I'll make sure to post that by the end of the day today. And that was in an email that I sent out. And I think it was even included for this meeting in that email.
I was asked about drop-off and pickup procedure for those not busing. We will establish that in terms of having the students come down in small groups to meet their families, and then we will set up a system for that where it could be socially distant and also as quick as possible, but also as safely as possible. A question about winter being around the corner. How will we address students being seated for hours? So within the classroom, with the benefit of having smaller students in a classroom is that you can spread the students out and possibly do a brain break or a movement break. You can still take as long as it is not raining or heavy inclement weather, you can still take the children outside in the winter. Those of you who are parents in this building know until March 12th when we went out, we were only inside 9 days last year. So we do try to get out for a lunch and recess. So we do try to get out as often as possible. But certainly if it's an inclement weather day where we cannot get outside, classroom teachers are sensitive to that since they'll be in classrooms all day as well. And they will engage children in as best as possible movement breaks and brain breaks so that they're not seated for hours on it. Our teachers and admin being masked. So that is the personal choice of the teacher who is in the classroom, but if they were within 6 feet of the student, they will absolutely have a mask on. So if they're working with a student one-on-one or walking around the room, then their mask will be on. Is band or chorus continuing? How will that look? So in grades, in all grades, kids will have music. We will have in lieu of a general music class, it'll be a music appreciation class throughout the grades that Ms. Kroll will teach mostly to the lower grades, 4 and 5. Mr. Compton will have a section or two of those grades. And then 6th through 8, Mr. Compton will be teaching that music appreciation class. In terms of having band, we're looking into possibilities. I know Ms. Haddon shared, I believe at the last board meeting, looking into possibilities of possibly an after-school option, but we would have to, because they're playing instruments where potentially they're blowing into those instruments, it would have to be 12 feet of distance. So we just have to look into what's possible once we get the school year started.
Yep, and we're looking at that specifically for 7th and 8th grade. We're looking at continuing lessons during the day, individually or in a very, very small group, as much as possible as time allows. But in terms of band practice, we would be looking at it doing by grade level, a day for 7th grade per week, a day for 8th grade per week, same thing for chorus. And again, it would be after school. But we are still working on that with the teachers and with our schedule.
A question came in about hand washing. When will the children be required? So students will have the opportunity when they go to the restroom, obviously, to wash their hands Most of our classrooms have sinks. Those classrooms that not, we will make these sinks available to students to be able to go and wash their hands throughout the day as they need.
It will also be done before they eat and after they eat. If hand washing is not available, they will at least be able to use hand sanitizer, and also after they come back in from recess.
Ms. Haddon, there was a message at 1:05. I don't know if you want, I believe you addressed a piece of that.
So I'm just kind of following along, and I'm afraid to lose my spot. I'm up to how will the drop-off and pickup procedures be, and I believe that Mr. Golczyk, you said that you are still working on that,
Yep.
But we will communicate that, and students will be able to be dropped off from their cars and picked up, but parents will no longer be entering the building.
And there was I believe another question after that.
Let me read. I'm finding it hard to understand. If there is a mandate for all of New York State to wear a mask when outside of the home, how is there even a choice? It is required that any individual over the age of 2 and be able to medically tolerate a face mask when a public place must wear one. Please clarify. And I understand that that is the case and the expectation. What I can say is that and I could read the guidance to you specifically, but it says that it is strongly recommended, but it is not required. As long as students can be 6 feet of distance apart, they do not need to be masked. If so, the key is the 6 feet of different distance. Okay. Contact tracing, I'll answer this one. How will this work if contact tracing is happening? Well, the entire families and people they have come in contact with have to quarantine for 14 days. So again, we will work on that on a case-by-case basis, and it will be specific to under the advice of the Department of Health. The school in Georgia where they are not wearing masks, the second grade or other students and teachers tested positive for COVID. Why chance this with our students and teachers? Again, our procedures follow the Department of Health guidance and guidelines. If you are not comfortable sending your child to school, we absolutely understand, and we do have the remote option. While teachers are walking around the classroom, oh, you can answer that one, Jeffrey.
Oh yes, if teachers are walking around the classroom, the teachers will have their mask on if they are within 6 feet of the student. And yes is the answer to the follow-up. Will students have to be masked as well while the teacher is walking around? If there's within 6 feet of each other, then yes.
Yes, students and teacher. Well, if the teacher's walking around, the teacher and the students will need to be masked. So if the teacher's circulating around the room, helping individual students, yes, the students would need to be masked. That's all 3 of those questions. That one's for you.
Okay, so I'm going to read it out loud as I'm processing it too. So with regard to remote learning, should the school have to shut down as they being taught how to use the technology throughout the day? So yes is the answer to that question. So I had a conversation, for those of you of older students, I was actually on yesterday and then earlier today with my 7th and 8th grade teachers, kind of working through a couple logistics, especially for our honors sections where they're taking the Regents class, and there's, there's a lot of advanced practice with that. And so we talked about, can you have, like, when a teacher confers with a student or they have a small group with students, can you do it through Meet or Zoom like we are now? Can you have that structure? And the answer is yes. And so it's through establishing those structures within the classroom now, where we're using those online tools, we're getting the kids ready God forbid, in an instance where we have to all be remote. If that is the case, if that should happen like we were told in March, then we are preparing kids to be ready. And also we are working out a schedule where it will, as best as possible, mirror the school day so that students are also having fidelity of instruction.
And I just want to quickly go back to, and pardon me, the question about the rule of the state versus our rules. And this is from the school reopening FAQs. Pursuant to the New York State Department of Health guidance, schools must ensure that appropriate social distancing is maintained between individuals when in school facilities and on school grounds, unless the safety or the core activity requires a shorter distance. Schools must maintain protocols and procedures for students, faculty, and staff to ensure appropriate social distancing to protect against the transmission of the COVID virus. As a baseline, face coverings are required to be worn anytime or place that individuals cannot maintain appropriate social distancing. Further, face coverings are recommended by the New York State Department of Health at all times except for meals and instruction when appropriate social distancing can take place. So, go ahead. Sorry, Jeffrey, go ahead.
No, I think that, I think the next 2 or 3 questions were about masking as well.
Okay. So the masks, I'm hoping that I just answered that by reading that guidance, and that is what our district is following. 6 feet will be broken throughout the day, so students will need to put on masks. Kids are not going to be able to not be masked the entire school day. Whenever they enter the hallway or they come within 6 feet, they are going to have to put a mask on. That is correct. And then I'm going to go back to the school in Georgia one. I cannot speak to the school in Georgia or what the circumstances were or what the rules they had in place. I am not sure of Georgia's rules, but I know that our rules and guidance and our plan aligns with the New York State Department of Education and the New York State Department of Health. And if it didn't, we will, or if any aspect of it does not, we will hear back from the Department of Health that it does not.
And if, in terms of hallways, we will also be making the hallways that are squares, which is our 7th and 8th grade area. And then also 4th and 5th, we're gonna make those hallways unidirectional. So that should also help cut down when students are going to and from areas, like coming in at the beginning of the day and then going home. Temperature checks. So we are going to have crowd scanners when students come in the building. So it'll be en masse checking their temperature. They will have, I believe, and Ms. Haddam, please correct me if I'm wrong, face recognition. So it'll be private for the individual. Oh, no.
So we are not uploading. Nope, we are not uploading. We're not doing face recognition or uploading our kids' faces and scanning them and identifying individuals. That is not the case. We are doing crowd temperature scanners. There will be someone there watching the screen as it comes in, and if someone appears hot, it will do a quick screen grab of that child's face, which will then immediately be sent to the administrator, so the administrator can come, and then the individual that's standing there watching the machine can, pull the child aside and go get taken a second temperature by the school nurse prior to being actually removed from the school or sent home for having a fever. In terms of has the plan been approved by the state? The answer to that is we were told that we will be contacted if our plan is not approved, and otherwise we are to assume that our plan was approved. So the Department of Health has been reaching out to individual districts if they are not approving their plan.
And then,
so in terms of masks in the classroom, are they going to be on more than off? I think that what I envision is the teacher will teach if they're circling around the room helping kids, but at times that, you know, if the teacher is sitting at her desk and can call individual students over, then the kids that are sitting at the desks can not wear their masks. I cannot tell you exactly how many minutes masks will be on or off, but we are hoping to give students time without their masks on for as much as possible.
Also, if I could jump in, when students are working one-on-one with their teachers, as well as whether it's a general ed situation or a special ed situation, and related service providers, we have, and I think we've shown these a few times, we have clear masks so that students' faces and teacher faces and related service providers are identified. So we have these for students, teachers. They are reusable, washable. We also ordered, in some cases, for students and teachers, you know, on our earlobes, or they tie that, and they haven't arrived yet, they'll be here soon, that have open spaces for clear, so you're able to see the face, you know, the lips and part of the nose, so teachers and students are more recognizable and you're able to hear and see what they're trying to communicate. And again, if these partitions are being used in some of those circumstances, as Mr. Golubchik and Ms. Haddon had mentioned earlier, students don't need to wear, you know, wear the masks, or teachers, because the partitions are considered a very safe barrier.
But also even, and this is not the stopgap for everything, but even with the live instruction that we moved to in April in the spring, teachers definitely in 6 through 8 used a lot of Google Docs during their live sessions and Google Classroom, even during their live sessions, to be able to poll kids live and get responses from them. So those will still be opportunities teachers will be able to use that, especially in our upper grades, throughout the class and throughout the day, to be able to ask questions and interact with them, to limit the amount of moving around the classroom as well.
I had a question sent to me privately through the chat, so I just want to address that. The question was, will bus size be reduced? So again, what we're doing in terms of buses is that we are asking as many families as possible to drive their students to school. We are looking to put one home or one household per seat, so that people from multiple households are not sharing seats on the bus, and students will be masked on the bus. I foresee a great reduction because, number one, any student that's remote would not need to be bused to school anymore. So that takes out, I believe, about, as of right now, about 30% of our student population, 28% to be exact, give or take once final choice. And then of the students of the families that chose in-person restriction, about 50% said they'd be willing to drive their kids to school. So we're taking everyone that rode the bus, reducing that by 30%, and then reducing it another 50%. So yes, I expect that absolutely the number of students on the bus will be reduced. In addition, we are in the process of buying 2 new school buses, and I'm looking at, if we need to, adding them as additional bus runs in order to make sure that the numbers on the buses stay low.
The drop off.
School lunches.
So the question is, will school lunches be brought to the classrooms, or will it be a grab and go for the students to get it themselves? They will be brought to the classrooms. School lunches will be brought to the classrooms for each cohort. So if, for example, grades 4 and 5 have lunch at around, let's say 11:30 to 12:15, by 11:30-ish, lunches will be ready for the kids in their rooms. And that will then have the opportunity to eat for about 20 minutes, transition outside, and then be outside for about 15, 20 minutes, which is more or less the exact time that they had while in school this year. So that time is not being reduced, because I think too, a lot of your questions, we all feel that it's very important for students to have that movement and those movement breaks, and certainly recess is a time to do that. Would it be possible to drop off kids at 7 a.m.?
So we will have an extended drop-off period. I think 7 a.m. is probably a little bit too early. I imagine it will start around 7:35 or 7:40, somewhere in there, but that will, Mr. Golubchik will release that with the car drop-off and drop-off and pickup procedures.
Question came in that asked, will there be food restrictions, nuts, etc., for students that are bringing packed lunch, being that lunches will be in homeroom? So that is a multi-parted question and a multi-parted answer. So the answer to the question is that there will not be food restrictions, but if we have a nut allergy, for example, I myself have food allergies, so I'm very, very sensitive to that. If we have an allergy in a classroom, then we will have to figure that out in terms of how students are sectioned. Since students will be in smaller cohorts and more sections, we do have a little bit more flexibility with that.
In terms of getting tested for COVID, the school district is not allowed ourselves to test for COVID. And I know there's a lot of confusion about that right now because Governor Cuomo spoke specifically to it. Basically what in terms of we talked to the I met with the Department of Health commissioner last week, and what they are saying is that the primary COVID tester should always be the primary care physician. If you don't have a primary care physician or are having trouble, then we have a list of, and it will be posted to our oh no, it's not there. It was on the back of my other binder. I have a list of Orange County COVID testing sites that we will be able to share with individual families. At this, Jeffrey, we have about 3 minutes left before we need to get off and move on to 7th and 8th grade. But what we'll do is we'll try to answer as many questions as we can in that 3 minutes. And then if we didn't get to your question, please reach out to any one of us directly.
All right. So is there a process for managing homework that students will be bringing in from the residences into the school? So we are already talking about that in terms of making homework more paper forward if students are remote. So giving them a spelling workbook or potentially a math workbook for if they're home. We also have IXL, just like in the elementary school, which is a math tool that could be used online. And then teachers are already considering options, especially in science and social studies, to not have a physical notebook, but to have more digital work. And certainly with Google Docs and Google Classroom, we are able to make that all possible. If a child has a fever, he needs a doctor's note before returning to schools. Yes, so that is similar procedures. I know this was discussed, but there's so much to retain. Please reiterate for me, are students screened before entering the school day every day? And if so, is what the procedure? So students will be screened before they get on the bus in terms of temperature. And then students will also be crowd scanned before they come into the building. And we will, if they have a temperature, we will be sent a scan of that, a snapshot of that, so that the administrators, it's private, we will be able to identify who that was. What about if they miss school for other reasons? What's the process to go back to school the next day? So if they're missing school for other reasons, typical to any event that you may have going on outside of school, they would just come back. Students would just come back the next day.
Also, Jeffrey, I just wanted to mention that parents will also be receiving, and I know Ms. Haddon is working on that right now with Ms. Polchinski. It's a parent screener that parents are going to be required to not send to us, but do like a checklist at home that they are going to have, like questions that they're going to have to like answer for themselves, so to speak, before sending their students onto the bus or to drop off.
And then perfect place to end. Ms. Velez and Mr. Boussard thanked us for our time, as now Sandra did as well. So I am available if you need to reach me. I'm sure as any of our administrators on this Zoom are as well, please definitely send me. I mean, I know most of you already have kids in the school as well, so you know that I respond to emails very quickly. Please reach out directly if you have a question that's general or specific. Definitely if it's specific to your child, reach out directly to me, and we will get them answered for you.
Thank you so much,